80,000 machines rolled off the assembly lines. Over half of them burned to ashes on the battlefields of the Second World War. The legendary angled armor deflected shells, but it created a deadly trap. Space vanished. The two-man turret became a steel coffin. Engineers originally designed it for a much smaller weapon. Now it housed a massive 76mm cannon. The commander fought completely blind. He used a single primitive periscope to scan the horizon. He also worked as the loader. Textbooks promised 5 rounds per minute. Combat reality dictated only 2. The crew choked on gunpowder smoke. They fought blind. Then came the incoming fire. The Soviet steel alloy boasted incredible hardness, but it remained fatally brittle. A heavy German shell strikes the turret. The outer armor holds, but the kinetic shockwave shatters the inner layer. A vicious hail of jagged metal splinters explodes directly into the tankers' faces. Their own protective shell shredded them alive. Next came the flames. Soviet ammunition ignited instantly. The desperate crew smashed the fire extinguishers. A suffocating, toxic stench of carbon tetrachloride filled the dark box. In the extreme heat of the burning tank, this chemical vaporized into a lethal gas, silently poisoning men who just wanted to breathe. They had to escape. But the early turret featured one massive hatch. It weighed over 40 kilograms. A bleeding commander could never push it open. The driver clawed at his awkward front hatch. Time ran out. 2 dead out of 3 crew members in every burned machine. A destroyed American Sherman tank claimed only 1 life on average. The Soviet design offered no such mercy. The metal held strong. Survival inside was virtually impossible. Packing millions of soldiers into these steel coffins required a ruthless vision, which took shape in 1929 inside the office of Joseph Stalin. Why did the country demand tens of thousands of tanks? The Red Army Command wanted a strategy of rapid annihilation, aiming to grind any opposing force into dust. Funding this mechanized armada demanded unimaginable capital, and the state extracted it through a brutal agricultural collectivization campaign. The government stripped the villages of grain to finance heavy industry. The cost meant nothing. Human life served as just another consumable material for the grand strategy. Soviet agents hurriedly acquired foreign blueprints to kickstart domestic tank production. They bought designs for the British Vickers and the American Christie tanks, pushing them straight into mass assembly. The Vickers chassis evolved into huge fleets of light infantry support vehicles, while the Christie suspension birthed a fast cavalry line. Yet these early models proved too fragile for the impending continental slaughter. The leadership required a new, universal machine for a global war. The regime demanded brilliant machines. The state rewarded that engineering genius with a firing squad. While factories prepared to forge the new sloped armor, the mastermind behind its beating heart was already dead. Blueprints lay scattered across drafting tables under harsh lamps. The V12 diesel engine promised unmatched power. It would soon become an enduring legend of global tank warfare. But its creator never lived to witness the triumph. Secret police officers dragged Konstantin Chelpan from his office during the bloodletting of 1937. A quick trial. A bullet ended his life. Chief designer Mikhail Koshkin took over the fractured project. He pushed forward with the A-20 prototype. Standing on a wind-swept testing ground, he ran his bare hands across the ice-cold metal of the slanted hull. This angled steel was a brutal revelation. It deflected kinetic strikes better than any thick vertical plate. German engineers still built rigid steel boxes. They would only learn to angle their armor after watching their own shells bounce off Koshkin's creation. But the designer paid the ultimate price for his vision. Koshkin drove the prototypes 2,000 kilometers through a savage winter storm to prove their reliability. The freezing open-air journey destroyed his lungs. He collapsed. Mikhail Koshkin died from severe pneumonia just as the first mass-production models rolled out of the factory gates. The regime built the foundation of this legendary armor entirely on the bones of its architects. The machine was finally ready, but time had run out. It was 1941. German troops crossed the border of the Soviet Union. How do you replace 20,000 destroyed tanks in a single year? You strip the machine. You throw out every single part that does not make the main gun fire. By 1942, freight trains dragged the surviving Soviet factories deep behind the Ural Mountains. Workers shoved heavy lathes off flat cars directly into the snowdrifts. Factory 183 did not wait for walls to go up. They did not wait for roofs. Assembly started under the open sky. The temperature plummeted to -40 degrees. The deafening clang of sledgehammers against cold armor cut through the blizzards. Starving women and teenagers stood on wooden crates just to reach the freezing machinery. Engineers gutted the original design. They ripped out the driver's seat. A man could steer sitting on a bare metal box. They discarded the rubber from the road wheels. They even stopped painting the metal. Raw, rusting holes rolled straight from the frozen dirt to the front lines. The crew rode in a blind, deafening steel trap. But this brutal sacrifice had a clear purpose. The assembly line never stopped moving. Exhausted people built 1,200 T-34 tanks every month. That meant 40 new machines rolled out every single day. German industry managed to build 1,300 Tiger I tanks throughout the entire war. The Soviet Union matched that total in 4 weeks. State strategy traded human comfort for a relentless flood of steel. And the production cost of each tank plummeted by 40%. The stripped-down Ural assembly turned the whole into a torture chamber. Drivers needed a weightlifter's raw power simply to change gears. The sloped frontal armor crushed inward. Comfortable driving required a height of exactly 1 meter 20 centimeters. But drivers also needed massive muscle. The mechanic grabbed the steel lever with both hands. He pulled with his entire back. The unsynchronized gearbox let out a deafening crunch. Shoulders screamed. Palms bled. Every maneuver drained human life. Above him, the blind turret spun. A full rotation took exactly 10 seconds. Too fast. Uncontrollable. The heavy steel kept spinning after the gunner released the handle. Fine adjustment required brutal manual cranking. The floor lacked a rotating basket. Commanders stood directly on ammo boxes. One careless step during rotation meant severed legs. The cannon itself killed efficiently. Armor-piercing shells shattered German steel. They punched through 90 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. The enemy had no shield, but raw ballistics meant absolutely nothing. Supply chains collapsed. Entire divisions entered the slaughter completely dry. Escape remained an illusion. Early models gave the radio operator absolutely no evacuation hatch. He sat trapped in total darkness, blind, waiting to burn. Crews refused to surrender. Tankers with completely empty ammunition racks pressed the throttles and directly rammed firing enemy artillery batteries. But ramming was a fatal exception. Usually, blind crews with a handful of shells drove straight into the meat grinder of 1941. At first, the enemy panicked. The German vanguard met 900 T-34 tanks and simply stopped. Enemy 37mm rounds shattered against the sloped steel like glass. Dozens of direct hits left nothing but scratches. The Soviet machines seemed immortal. Why did invulnerable machines burn by the hundreds? Crews tried to coordinate attacks with signal flags right under fire. Engineers forged flawless armor. The high command ignored the human cost. 72 hours. That was the entire training cycle for a new tanker. Infantrymen got more time just to memorize basic field regulations. Recruits stepped into complex fighting vehicles without knowing how to survive. Chaos consumed the battlefields. Formations broke instantly. Experienced German panzer units quickly outflanked the blind, deaf Soviet columns. When standard cannons failed, the enemy positioned their 88mm anti-aircraft guns. They fired from long distances. Heavy shells tore the unmatched armor apart. State strategy treated people like disposable parts. Inside the dark hulls, drivers wrestled with gears they barely understood. Hatches opened. Commanders desperately waved colored fabric through the smoke to guide their wingmen amid flying shrapnel. A single platoon received exactly one radio station for the commanding officer. By the summer of 1943, The German Panther forced engineers to frantically redraw their blueprints. New enemy cannons shattered Soviet armor. The T-34 faced total extermination. Panic set in. Crews burned. Designers scrambled. They rushed the T-43 project. It carried an 85mm gun. It failed. Thick steel crippled the suspension. The prototype barely crawled. A dead end. They returned to the old chassis. This single engineering choice would dictate the tank's silhouette until the very end of the war. They cut steel. Mechanics widened the main turret ring, just 18 centimeters, a microscopic gap. But those 18 centimeters ended the claustrophobic nightmare that had suffocated crews for 3 straight years. They dropped a spacious turret right onto the original hull. The massive cannon fit. The engineers found a solution. By 1944, machines with a spacious 3-man turret finally reached the front lines. The T-34-85 was a different beast entirely. Mechanics thickened the hull armor to 90 millimeters. Engineers wired radios directly into the turrets. Crews could finally coordinate. They stopped fighting death. But the massive new cannon devoured internal space. The ammunition rack shrank to 50 shells. Loaders kept only 9 rounds ready for a rapid fight. How did survivability change? A third man inside the turret flipped the odds. The commander dropped the heavy shells. He stopped loading the breech. He finally looked through his cupola and monitored the burning battlefield. The gunner focused strictly on the crosshairs. The loader slammed rounds into the gun. The killing machine found its brutal rhythm. The massive Soviet offensive strategy became a reality. As thousands of tanks spearheaded a relentless push toward Berlin, colossal human casualties paved the way to this tactical perfection. Infantry rode directly on the bare metal into the meat grinder. Under a hailstorm of enemy shrapnel, the soldiers held on. Whitened fingers gripped the welded armor handrails. Tracers lashed the air. Artillery tore the earth apart. They clung to the steel. The Empire forged a weapon so relentlessly effective it refused to die. These iron coffins outlived their creators. The T-34-85 still fired its cannon in the conflicts of the 21st century.